Hello and welcome to Roundtable. Just below the Sahara and in an area bigger than Europe, France has been fighting what it now seems to be admitting is an unwinnable war against terrorist groups, and it's pulling out of the Sahel. Or is it? France's President Emmanuel Macron says Operation Barkhane in Mali will end, but that some of the 5,000 troops will stay and that other countries will do more. Is he pandering to French voters, or is the fight lost? Good to have your company. I'm David Foster. It is also said that Macron's sending a message to African leaders that they must step up anti-terror operations in their own countries, and that he's trying to appease Africans who don't like the continued presence of a colonial power on their land. What is the truth? France's President Emmanuel Macron said that Operation Barkhane will be replaced by an international military operation. The long-standing presence of France, he said, cannot be a substitute for political stability and the choices of sovereign states. Operation Barkhane began in 2014, a French counter-terrorism mission in Mali, involving around 5,000 French troops. Despite the operation's efforts, militants have continued to cause instability in the country. In France, Operation Barkhane is increasingly seen as a long-running financial burden, while anti-French sentiment continues to simmer across the Sahel, with protests in Mali and Senegal this year. Is the end of this French mission in Mali overdue, or could it destabilize the Sahel region? Well, since Mali is one of the countries most involved, let's go to Bamako in that nation, first of all, and we see the journalist Mohamed Salaha, and then to Paris, where we welcome Emmanuel Dupuy, President of the Institute for European Perspective and Security. Great to have you both with us. Mohamed, since you happen to be in Mali, I'm going to come to you first of all to ask about that country, and then you can go on later to talk about the wider Sahel region. And my first question is, how much of a foothold do different terrorist groups have in your country in particular?
Terrorists or jihadists have been installed in Mali years ago, before 2012. But in 2012, that was the beginning of terrorism, of jihadism in Mali, because they occupy northern region and start doing attacks against Western and France, or people collaborating with France. That's why they have kidnapping French citizens in Timbuktu region, in Gao region, and they have killed some Western. So,
but you are going back almost a decade to when they first got a toehold in the region. My question is about today, 2021. How much influence and power and terror do they wield over Mali this time?
Today they are powerful in Mali because a large part of the territory is not occupied by Malian administration, and in those areas, terrorist jihadists are the one who has power. They are the one who threats populace. They are the one who make law. They make their law in some places. So the time is flying, and they are gaining forces. Even in the center now, we have some villages which are under Sharia rule of Islam. So they show how terrorists have strength, and they threat populace, and also they threat every single citizen who collaborates with Western. So in Mali today, we can say that jihadists or terrorists have force, and they make law in a lot of parties in the north, in the center.
It seems to be that you are suggesting that they are perhaps more powerful now than they were 10 years ago and in mid-2010s when Operation Barkhane began. So, Emmanuel, my question to you is how can the president of France that went in there to try to control this situation with his forces actually justify pulling out when the terrorists appear to be getting stronger?
Well, the reason for the French intervention was not to replace the Malian authorities, nor the Malian army, or even though they were weakened by a coup d'etat in March 2012. We were here to sustain, we were here to mentor, we were here to train. This happened 8 years ago, as you rightly mentioned. And we have to be very cautious of what we're saying. A certain number of terrorist organizations have grown stronger, but did not exist precisely in the way they are operating now when Serval operation acted. We have to remind that France intervened the 9th of January 2013 to counter the linkage between secessionist armed groups, which were not jihadi focused, which is based on the secessionist Azawad, therefore Tuareg secessionist movement, with some terrorist organization linked to Al-Qaeda more than Daesh at that time, which was burdening or putting danger on most part of the Mali. That was between January 2013 and March 2014.
Then, are you saying, sorry, but I'm just trying to clarify this. Are you saying that the French troops were never there to combat the jihadist problem? No,
they were there they were had to combat, as the Malian authorities did not have the capability of doing so. But they were not there to, let's say, fulfill what is the role of local and national armies. This has never been what the Malian authorities asked us for. We were here to train. And by the way, this has been very successful. 18,000 of the Malian military have been trained since that time. So we cannot say that France has a responsibility in only fighting terrorist organizations. They were here to start this fight. And by the way, they are not the only ones, as there's more Europeanization of that combat and regionalization of that combat as well. But again, France, there's a core difference between the first operation, Mission Serval, Operation Serval, between January 2013 and August 2014, which was very successful. We maintained to ensure the territorial integrity of Mali, and there has been a shift in the danger. It is not only focused on Mali, it has spread throughout the Sahel countries, of course, namely the 5 countries, or moreover the 3 amongst the 5 Sahel countries.
May I come back to that in just a moment, because I want to talk about the wider Sahel and indeed those countries to the north. For the moment, Emmanuel, thank you very much indeed, but I want to throw something to Mohamed that you mentioned. You said the French forces, Emmanuel, have been very successful in training the Malian forces. Mohamed, I believe your view is very different, that you think the Malian forces are frightened of the jihadists, that they ran away from the terrorists, and in a way they are frightened and jealous of the French troops.
The main role of French troops is to combat terrorism. This is the main role. But training is not their main role. We have European Union troops who are always focused on Malian army training, but French role is to fight against terrorism. Beyond that, they provide support to civilians, they provide logistic support to Malian army, but they are more focused on the fight against terrorism.
Okay, if when they pull out, when they pull out, when Operation Barkhane does come to an end, will the Malian forces be in a better position if what they've got mostly from the French is training, or will that not have made much difference in the fight against the jihadists?
Honestly, I think no. And the Malians who are living in the areas where French army intervene, they really want those forces to remain, to keep ensuring security and safety for the population, because in most of the area of the north of the center, we do not have Malian army, we do not have administration, we have armed groups or some people who armed which are not regular army. So French army is necessary for civilian.
Mohamed, I think Emmanuel wants to get in with a point here. Yeah. We're trying to make this as conversational as possible, so please do.
French army has never been there to replace the Malian authority. What my colleague is saying is that the Malians need the French to do what the normal Malian military and security forces must do. That is not exactly the purpose of our intervention. As it was rightly mentioned, we were here to fight against a terrorist organization, namely le Groupe de soutien à l'Islam et aux musulmans, which was born throughout the clustering of Al-Qaeda linked groups. Well, of course, Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb, Al-Morabitoun and Sardine, and of course, with the creation of the Islamic State in Great Sahara, groups linked to Daesh. But again, France has never said, and the French president was very clear, that we're not here to stay and to replace the Malian army.
But does it not, France, have a moral obligation, given the what the people in those northern areas and central areas are facing, because there is no Malian army there? Does France not have a moral obligation to do more?
French Operation Barkhane is operating in two areas. In the northern part of Mali, where we have three bases, base of Tessalit, Kidal, and Tombouctou, and in the center part of Mali, where we have the major base of our military operation. There are actually 2,100 French soldiers present in Mali, among the 5,500 present in Barkhane operation. France has said, President Macron has said, that we're not leaving right away. We are living in a progressive way. That means that we're going to close down the bases in the northern part of Mali, where the terrorist organizations are less active in the recent months than they are in the central part of Mali. This is precisely where a terrorist suicide attack happened a few days ago in Gossi, in Gourma province, where 6 French military have been wounded and 4 Malian civilians. We are going to operate more in the Liptako-Gourma province. We are going to operate more in the Messina vicinity, where precisely there is a sort of clustering of these organizations. We are going dedicated to go southern in the what's so-called area of the three borders. And this is exactly the move that the French operations is going. Closing down the operational base we have in the northern part of Mali. These bases were active when we were fighting against the clustering of terrorist organization and secessionist group that was between.
We're going to bring up a map now of the Sahel region and reference from the west to the east, Mauritania, then we come to Mali, then Niger, then Chad, then Sudan. For the purposes of this program,
Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso, I beg your pardon. In Mali, you talk about the north and the central operations, withdrawing from the north. One of the routes through has been across the southern parts of Algeria into Libya and up to the coast of the Mediterranean for these jihadists to get into Europe. In doing so, will the security be lessened at the point where it is most needed?
There is no such link to terrorist threat or terrorist linkage between the terrorists we are facing in Europe and the terrorists coming from Sahel. In France, there has been 330 persons who have been killed since the first major attacks in November 2015. None of them came from Sahel. So this is total nonsense and absolutely lie to put a linkage between a potential terrorist Sahel threat and terrorism, which is coming from the French who have flown from France and gone to fight in Syria, Libya, and Iraq.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a moment, Emmanuel, and ask about why, therefore, France felt the need to do this, if there has been no linkage between terrorist groups from there and your own country. But, Mohamed, do you want to take a look at the wider Sahel area? We've got Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Sudan. And tell me how you believe the area is still being destabilized, if that is what you think.
For France to help the Sahel securing its territory, it's also helping and securing French interest, because in all those countries we have French enterprises, we have also French citizens. So when the jihadists, the armed group, progress to the capital city, it may affect France. When it affects French citizens, it's directly or indirectly affect French. So the situation is becoming more and more extended, and by the time those terrorists are gaining field, even as my colleague said, Barkhane is not here to do Malian military work. No one asked Barkhane to do Malian military work, but Barkhane is here to support. And and this support, regarding this support, they have to assist. They have to provide logistic support. That's what they are doing, and people do appreciate that.
Let me ask you.
It's true. There are some people who do not appreciate, but most of people in the north, in the center, appreciate the work they are doing.
Well, that's partly answered one of my questions, but I'll lay them both out in front of you. One of the criticisms has been that people in certain countries are fed up with a former colonial power trying to provide their own security. To some extent, you've answered that, but you can go into more details. The other point that's raised is that Macron is telling African leaders in the region to get their own house in order. It is time for them to look after themselves. I'll tell you what, we'll listen to Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French foreign minister, for a moment.
Evidently, the fight against terrorism remains part of our priorities, even though the Barkhane model is no longer adaptable. We want to have consultation in order to try and transform this model into a model which is less about a territorial footprint of French forces and more about support towards forces of affected countries.
He's saying, you are on your own. It is time for you to look after yourselves.
Okay. Let me tell you that when the French operation started in Mali, when the former President François Hollande started the operation, they intervened in Konna to stop the progress of jihadists. When after that he came in Mali, he said that this is the most important political day of his life. He is here because Mali was there for France in a needed time. So you see the relation is France is in Mali. It's because France is like paying a debt to Mali. So this is why we share a lot of Mali and France have good diplomatic relation.
So has that debt been paid?
Intervene in Mali is not like something dangerous. But I understand some people who are protesting in Bamako, also asking for the departure of France and trying to say that this is it's
but
like
do you think,
Mohamed,
do you think that debt, as you say, which was owed, do you think it has been paid, or have the people of Mali and the Sahel been left short-changed?
No, the debt has not been paid yet because Mali, Africa was there for France until France have been freed. So France is here, is in the Sahel because it must be in the Sahel. So France should keep collaborating until the Sahel, the countries of the Sahel should be able to take their own responsibilities and secure their borders.
Emmanuel, you heard a lot there. I don't know what you want to respond to or listen to a question from me, but off you go.
There's a lot to reply. First of all, I'm not sure that France is the only country to have the debt in that region, because France is not the only country present in Mali and in the Sahel. If you take, for example, the United Nations mission, MINUSMA, we are speaking about 60 countries, 19 of European Union countries. If we are speaking about the training and mentoring, EUTM Mali, EUCAP Sahel Niger, EUCAP Mali, we are speaking about a European delegation, 5,000 French soldiers, 3,000 European soldiers, non-French. Therefore, it's a common endeavor. It's not only about France being the only one to be active in that part of the world. Second of all, I have to say that the question of debt is a very interesting question. The Malian military took power the 18th of August precisely because there was too much corruption inside the military army and inside the political spectrum. The part of the budget which is dedicated to defense is 20% of the total budget of Mali. There's a huge amount of money, huge capability. The problem is that it has not been used correctly, and this is one of the reasons why we must not stay indefinitely, because this will continue on and on. The Malian military authority have a budget of $500 million a year, which is absolutely huge for the area. By the way, it is the same thing in Burkina Faso, or even worse in Chad, where 22% of the budget is dedicated to
but
defense.
You're saying it's being siphoned away, that corruption means that it doesn't get spent on the military, are you? And that's precisely, isn't it, what Macron... That's what Macron is saying. He says it's time for you to look after yourselves.
Well, we said that. Well, Macron is not the only one who's saying this. Huh? All of the local authorities are saying the same thing. Assimi Goïta justifying his coup the 18th of August, saying we must not and we cannot continue like that. We are losing troops. More or less 3,000 of Malian military have been killed since the uprising. The most of the uprising to 2012.
Emmanuel, if I could just put this to you. You suggested that the terrorist organizations based in that region have not directly posed a threat to France over the last few years, that they come from elsewhere. Perhaps, let me finish, that they perhaps come from Syria and other places that are completely torn apart. If they don't come from here, where are these terrorist groups going and operating? And if all the troops pulled out, would there be a danger to Europe?
No, this is exactly what I'm saying. To be more precise, I'm saying that the terrorist organizations who are putting France under danger do not come from Sahel, but come from our own citizens who have been fighting elsewhere than in Sahel. There's no French to this extent.
I got that. What I'm saying is, where do you think these terrorists are going if they're not going to France? And if all the troops pulled out and you say there is no threat to France, what is the point in them remaining there?
Well, because they're threats to the Malians, they're threat to the Malians, a threat to the Nigerians. United Nations were very precise. Last year, 2020, 4,250 people have been killed in Burkina Faso, in Mali and Niger. We are here to assess the fact that the security is let's say, the first pillar of the development of any country. If there is no capability to ensure the security, then we are providing the security for the Malians themselves. And by the way, not only the Malians, we must have in mind that the situation is as worse in Mali as in Burkina Faso. Last year, 1,400 people, since 2015, 1,400 people have been killed in Burkina Faso. 30% of the territory is now under the direct threat and therefore the direct authority of jihadist groups, the same who are fighting against whom we're fighting in Mali. So to respond directly to your question, we're not there to only assure the security of the French or of the French company. By the way, this is not totally true, because the French economical interests are way less than the other countries' economic interests.
I'm going to have to cut you short as you go off on a slight tangent, Emmanuel, because we're running out of time on this program. And for understandable reasons, I'd like to go back to Mali itself and ask Mohamed if he could sum up his feelings about this. If money is spent correctly, because a large part of the budget is spent on the military, if it's not siphoned off, if it's spent properly, could Mali defend itself?
There is corruption inside the army. Unfortunately, we do not want it. The army authorities have denounced it, and civil society has denounced it. But it happened. Now, the most important thing is that our army, Malian army, is in reconstruction. They are in a reconciliation, because when there is a coup, sometimes some are part, some are not part. But you see, all the army are together and try to find a way to stop.
But that's not going to happen tomorrow, is it? The Malian army is not going to be as efficient as it could be tomorrow. So with the French withdrawal, whether it comes in 6 months, 9 months, or whatever, with the reduction in French forces, do you think the jihadists will see this as a victory, Mohamed?
Yes, it's true that it won't come yesterday or the day after. It must take time, but it will happen, because we know that France will not last forever here. But the withdrawal right now in an immediate time could be an occasion for jihadists to advance.
Okay, quick final word, Emmanuel. I know you're waving to come in. We've got about 45 seconds left. I know it's not much time, but off you go.
To complete what the colleague is saying, France and President Macron has never said we're withdrawing now. He said we will withdraw 1,600 troops by 2022.
But he says the jihadists will see this as a victory.
No, that's not true. Because let me, in one phrase, respond to that. the final step or the final dedication of the Malian authorities is to engage a dialogue with some of the insurgents. This is exactly what Assimi Goïta, what the new Prime Minister Chabel Maïga, and by the way, what Imam Dicko has always advocated for. And this is a core differences amongst Sahel states. Burkina Faso and Mali are willing to discuss with some of the secessionist and terrorist organizations, what we consider terrorist organization, which is not the case for Niger and Chad. And again, the final perspective, and this was absolutely true as well in Nigeria, is not to fight for 50 years terrorist organization, but to start and understand and fight against the reason why a certain number of young people are going to this insurgence.
If only I had realized before I asked you to be brief, or remember that you are a professor and you're off to address your students, and there's no point in you being short with them. Please give them all the very best, and thank you for coming on this round table. Same to you, Mohamed. Good luck in Mali. We appreciate you taking the time from Bamako, and wherever you happen to be watching this round table, we thank you for taking the time. I'm David Foster. Until next time, goodbye.